It started like any other corporate party. Dim lights, too loud conversations, and that awkward mix of celebration and social obligation no one wants to admit they hate. The event was supposed to be a celebration of excellence, after closing a major deal, held at one of those upscale hotels downtown with panoramic views of Denver and overpriced valet parking. I had planned to be there early, maybe grab a drink with the team before the room filled up. But a last-minute client call ran long. A stubborn negotiation that wouldn't die quietly, and by the time I made it to the 15th floor where the event was held, the party was already in full swing. I could hear the music before the elevator doors even opened. Some generic playlist of jazz remixes, the kind meant to make you feel like you're networking at an art gallery instead of getting half-drunk with coworkers. The air smelled like cologne, cheap Prosecco, and overly ambitious hors d'oeuvres. I walked in, still half in work mode, still thinking about the client's last-minute requests, and reflexively pulled out my phone to let Emma know I'd arrived. That's when I saw her. She was standing near the back of the room, by the bar where the lighting was softer, warmer, more flattering. She hadn't noticed me yet. Her back was to the window, Denver's skyline stretched out behind her like a stage backdrop. She looked stunning, no surprise there. Her dark green dress, fitted just enough to be elegant but not obvious, hugged her frame in a way that made my breath catch a little. Her hair was curled at the ends, like she had done something extra for tonight. For a second, I just stood there, taking her in, my phone still in hand, my thumb hovering over the message I'd meant to send. And then I saw him, Alex, the new art director, the one she'd mentioned a few times in passing, usually with a laugh. He's kind of creatively insane, she'd said once, but in a funny, smart way. I'd met him briefly during a team-building thing a couple of months ago. He was sharp, charming in a try-hard sort of way, the kind of guy who always wore clothes that didn't quite match but somehow made it work. I never thought much of him, but now I couldn't think about anything else. He was standing close to her, too close. His hand hovered behind her back, not quite resting on it but not resting on it either, that weird middle ground kind of touch that people use when they're testing boundaries, seeing what they can get away with. She didn't lean away. They were talking, laughing, and not just polite work laughter. She laughed like she used to laugh with me when we first started dating. Head tilted slightly back, eyes narrowing, completely unguarded. He leaned in and whispered something, and she tilted her face toward him, smiling that slow, private smile I hadn't seen in months, maybe longer. And then she did something that froze me in place. She reached forward, picked up the wine glass in front of him, and took a sip, still smiling, still staring into his eyes. That glass wasn't hers. I knew that instantly. Hers was in her left hand. She was holding it loosely by the stem. I saw her switch deliberately. The motion was so subtle, so fluid, that anyone watching casually might not have thought anything of it. But I wasn't just watching casually. I was watching like a husband who'd started to feel something slipping in the past few months but hadn't wanted to admit it. I was watching like someone who'd noticed the quiet changes, little ones, the kind that are easy to brush off when you still want to believe everything's fine. She took that sip like it was second nature, like she had done it before. And then, a moment later, she noticed me. Her body language shifted slightly, not dramatically, just enough to reset her posture, like an actor remembering an audience is watching. She smiled, casual, surprised, walked over to me with the kind of confident ease you can't fake. She leaned up and kissed my cheek. "You made it," she said brightly, like nothing had happened. "You look tired. Long meeting?" I nodded, studying her face. She didn't look flustered, didn't seem caught. "I was just talking to Alex," she said, tilting her head back toward the bar. He had a few last-minute tweaks for the campaign visuals. Nothing major. I nodded again. "You seemed deep in conversation." She smiled, brushing something invisible off my shoulder. "Yeah, he's always full of ideas. We were laughing about this ridiculous draft someone turned in. You know how creative teams are, all chaos and ego." I waited, wondering if she'd mention the wine. She did. "Oh, and I think I accidentally drank from his glass. We had the same wine, and I wasn't paying attention." She said it with a light laugh like it was no big deal, but it was. because I had seen the way she did it. The timing, the eye contact, the absence of hesitation. That wasn't the kind of mistake you make when you're distracted. It was the kind you make when your int asterisk made enough not to care. We stood there for a few more minutes, the conversation shifting to safer ground, her dress, my meeting, the ridiculous speeches happening near the projector screen. She looped her arm through mine, smiled up at me. Everything about her was measured, perfect. If I hadn't seen what I saw, I might have believed her. But something inside me had clicked, like a gear shifting into a new track. Not in a dramatic, explosive way. It was quiet, intentional, like finally acknowledging a draft in the room you'd been pretending wasn't there. For the rest of the night, I watched her differently. Not just her, us. I noticed how she never mentioned when she was leaving the bar area again. How she didn't offer to introduce me to anyone. How Alex glanced at her once across the room when she was talking to another colleague. Not possessively, but knowingly. Like they shared something I didn't see. I thought about asking her questions on the drive home. Thought about bringing it up gently. But I didn't. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't want her version of the story. I didn't want to hear the casual denial, the deflection, the "you're being dramatic" routine. I didn't want to be gaslit. What I wanted, for the first time in a long time, was clarity. And I had it now. I knew that wine wasn't hers. And I knew, in that quiet part of myself I had been ignoring, that this wasn't the first sip. I didn't say anything that night. Not in the car, not while we brushed our teeth side by side like we'd done 1,000 times. Not even when she climbed into bed and gave me the same perfunctory kiss she always did, short, soft, like a habit she wasn't sure she still believed in. I lay awake long after she fell asleep. And I thought, not the kind of thinking where you try to rationalize things, but the kind where your brain becomes a slide projector, flicking images, moments, conversations across the walls of your memory until patterns start to form. Things I'd buried, dismissed, explained away, now resurfaced with new clarity. And once I saw them, I couldn't unsee them. I remembered when she stopped charging her phone in the bedroom. It used to sit on her nightstand right next to mine. We had a rhythm. She'd scroll before bed, set her alarm, plug it in, kiss me goodnight. But one evening, a few months back, she casually said the charger cord was too short. I offered to get a longer one. She waved me off. "It's fine," she said. "I actually sleep better without the screen nearby." At the time, I admired her discipline. Now, I wondered what she was trying to keep out of arm's reach. I remembered how our Saturday mornings used to begin. Coffee brewing, her curled up on the couch in those oversized knit sweaters she loved, feet tucked under her, telling me about her dreams. The literal ones, not the goals. I'd sit beside her and listen while she gestured wildly with her mug. Then she stopped wearing the sweaters, replaced them with black leggings, tighter tops, jackets with bold shoulders and deep cuts. I didn't say anything. People change, I told myself. But when I reached across her lap one morning to steal a bite of her toast, she pulled her legs away like I'd burned her. I remembered when she started saying no to walks. That might sound small, but it wasn't. Evening walks had been our thing. Rain or shine, we'd walk through the neighborhood, talk about everything and nothing, stop to pet dogs, comment on houses we liked. Then one day she said she was tired. Then she said she had to finish work. Then she just didn't come. At first I kept asking. Then I stopped. It was easier than hearing another excuse. I remembered the night she came home wearing a single silver earring, thin, with a small dark stone at the end. I noticed it because it didn't match the other one. "Must have lost it somewhere," she said casually. "Maybe in the Uber." I offered to help look for it, even checked the porch and front seat of her car. She waved me off again. I remember how she started saying she needed me time on weekends. That was new. We used to do everything together on Saturdays, errands, brunch, movies, walking around the bookstore. Now, she'd kiss me on the cheek and say, "I'm gonna go see a friend." I'd ask which one, and she'd mumble, "You don't know her." Always singular, never plural, never a name. I noticed that. I also noticed she never invited me to come along. That was the most telling part. Not that she changed, people evolve, sure. Tastes shift. But the way she shut me out of her changes, that's what hurt. It was like she was reinventing herself in secret, carving out a new version of her that I wasn't supposed to see. Or maybe one I wouldn't recognize. There were other things too. Small things. Her phone was always on silent now. Face down on the table. Locked tighter than a vault. Notifications disabled. I'd catch her glancing at it during dinner, her fingers twitching like she was waiting for something. And when I asked about it, she'd smile and say, "Just work. You know how it is." I used to, but I wasn't sure I did anymore. I remembered once, maybe a month or two ago, I came home early. She hadn't heard me come in, and I saw her sitting on the back porch with her laptop open, FaceTiming someone. She was laughing, really laughing. That kind of laugh I saw again at the party with Alex. Her posture was relaxed, her hand twirling her hair. Her expression soft in a way it hadn't been with me in a long time. When she heard the door open, she slammed the laptop shut, said she was just watching a webinar. I believed her. Back then, I still wanted to. But the most damning memory didn't come with a lie or a missing earring. Came with silence. We were lying in bed, maybe 3 weeks before the party, and I had one of those rare moments of vulnerability. I turned to her and said, "Do you think we're okay?" She didn't answer at first. Then she rolled over and placed her hand on my chest. Not warmly, not comfortingly. More like placing a paperweight. "Of course we're okay," she said. "Why wouldn't we be?" I looked at her. Her face was unreadable in the dark. "I don't know," I said. "It just feels like you've been somewhere else lately." She laughed. A short, dry laugh. "You're just stressed," she said. "You always get like this after big projects. Don't overthink it." And that was it. The conversation was over before it began. Now I realized what bothered me wasn't just the response. It was how fast she gave it. Like she had practiced it. Like she had anticipated the question. And maybe she had. That night after the party, lying there in bed beside a woman I barely recognized anymore. All these pieces came flooding back, each one sharper than the last. I felt like I was solving a puzzle I didn't know I was building, one jagged edge at a time. And in the center of that puzzle was one undeniable truth. She was slipping away from me, not running, not hiding, just drifting, quietly, elegantly, with the same grace she used to set a table or tie a scarf. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't screaming fights or doors slamming or phone calls in the middle of the night. It was subtle, polished, smooth as wine poured into the wrong glass. And maybe that was what made it worse. There wasn't anything I could point to with certainty. Nothing I could take a picture of or record or present like evidence in a courtroom. But I felt it. In my bones, in my gut, in the slow erosion of her warmth. I felt it. And once you feel it, you can't unfeel it. The woman I had shared my life with for nearly a decade, my best friend, my partner, my anchor, was no longer walking beside me. She was already walking away, and she wasn't looking back. It was raining the next Saturday when I decided to go. Not storming, just that slow, persistent drizzle that makes everything feel heavier. Gray skies, windshield wipers ticking in rhythm like a metronome set to unease. I hadn't made a plan. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even fully admit it to myself. I just grabbed my keys and left the house, claiming I needed to pick up more coffee beans. Emma nodded from the kitchen, half distracted, stirring oat milk into her smoothie like it was any other morning. She said she was headed to yoga downtown. Same studio as usual. Same teacher. Same time. But my hands gripped the steering wheel a little tighter than usual. Because I didn't believe her. I didn't know where she was going exactly. Not for certain. But I had a feeling. Not some paranoid fantasy, not wild suspicion. Just instinct. That soft voice in your gut that you ignore until it becomes too loud to silence. She hadn't mentioned yoga all week. Then suddenly brought it up that morning like she remembered she was supposed to. And I just nodded. Smiled even. Kissed her on the cheek like always. But once I was in the car, I didn't head toward the grocery store. Or the yoga studio. I drove toward a small cafe downtown. Not the trendy one near her gym. Not the chain we used to visit on weekends. but a quiet little place with big windows and slow jazz, tucked between an antique bookstore and a boutique flower shop. It's where we'd gone after she got promoted 2 years ago. We had clinked glasses of rose over overpriced bruschetta. She told me she felt like she was finally becoming who she wanted to be. That cafe. That's where I found her. Her car was parked right out front, silver Toyota, rain sliding across the windshield in rivulets. I recognized the bumper sticker on the back. A tiny mountain silhouette she bought on a whim after our trip to Telluride. It was faded now. Like us. I didn't go in. Not right away. I parked across the street under a half-dead tree and shut off the engine. I told myself I was just looking, just watching. But I was lying to myself the same way Emma had been lying to me. From my vantage point, I could see into the cafe through its huge glass windows. The inside was warm and softly lit, a world apart from the cold drizzle outside. And there she was, Emma. She sat at a small table near the corner, her coat draped over the back of the chair, her face glowing in the soft amber light. She wasn't alone. Alex sat across from her. Even from a distance, I saw everything I needed to see. Her posture leaned in toward him, not dramatically, just enough to say, "I want to be closer." Her hand rested loosely near his coffee cup, like it had been there before. His face was relaxed, smiling. He said something that made her laugh, and I watched her reach out and tap his arm lightly, that familiar flirtatious gesture I used to know. Then, the part one wasn't ready for, he reached out and placed his hand gently on her knee, and she didn't move it. They weren't hiding. They weren't kissing. They weren't doing anything you could capture in a photo and hold up in court. But that made it worse. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This wasn't passion. This wasn't even guilt. This was comfort. This was routine. This was two people who knew exactly what they were doing and weren't afraid of being seen. I sat there in the car, one hand still on the steering wheel, the other gripping my thigh so tightly I left marks. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I wasn't anything, and that scared me more than all the rest. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel heartbreak. I felt silence, a kind of internal quiet that only comes when your mind finally stops negotiating with the truth. I think some part of me always knew. Not the conscious part, that part was busy writing excuses. But the deeper part, the one that watches patterns and collects details and never forgets how someone's laugh used to sound, that part had been whispering to me for months. And now it didn't have to whisper anymore. I stayed there in the car, letting the rain wash the windshield, watching the two of them exist in a world where I didn't belong. At one point, Emma looked up and toward the window, but not directly at me. Just a casual glance outside. Our eyes didn't meet. I don't think she knew I was there. Maybe she wouldn't have cared even if she did. I didn't wait to find out. I turned the key in the ignition and pulled away from the curb, careful not to squeal the tires. I didn't want drama. I didn't want confrontation. I didn't want to burst through the cafe doors and make a scene like in a bad movie. I wanted distance, and I wanted to keep whatever was left of my dignity. As I drove home, I passed the yoga studio she claimed she was going to. The sign was dim, the parking lot half empty. For a moment, I wanted to stop, go inside, ask if she checked in, as if I needed even more proof. But I didn't stop. What would be the point? She wasn't there. She never meant to be. Back at home, the house felt different. Not because anything had changed, everything looked the same. The mug on the counter, her shoes by the door, the scent of her shampoo faintly clinging to the hallway. But I saw it all with new eyes. This wasn't our house anymore. Not really. It was a stage set. A place where we played the roles of husband and wife, day after day, scene after scene. But somewhere along the way, the story had stopped being true. She'd rewritten her lines, and I hadn't noticed until I saw her performing them for someone else. I sat on the couch in the dark for a long time, listening to the rain tap against the windows. My mind replayed the scene in the cafe like a film loop, every movement, every glance, every unspoken line. I tried to imagine what they were saying. Were they talking about work? About me? About where to go next? Did he ask her if she loved me? Did she answer? I'll never know. And I think that's what cut the deepest, not knowing when the shift happened. not knowing the moment she stopped coming home to me in her heart, even if her body still walked through the door each night. Maybe it started small. Maybe it was just curiosity, a spark, a moment. But whatever it was, it grew. And it took her away from me, inch by inch, laugh by laugh, sip by sip. I didn't sleep that night. Emma came home around 5 p.m. cheerful, damp from the rain. She said class had been intense, that the instructor added a new sequence and she was sore. She tossed her bag by the stairs and made a joke about needing a glass of wine to recover. I nodded, said nothing. She poured herself a glass, asked if I wanted one. I declined. "Suit yourself," she said, sipping. "You okay?" I looked at her for a long moment. She looked the same, but she wasn't. And neither was I. "I'm fine," I said. And maybe for the first time in months that was true, because now at least I knew. After that day at the cafe, something inside me shifted permanently. Not like a lightning strike, not some big cinematic moment. It was quieter than that. Like the sound a door makes when it closes slowly but completely. Click, not a slam. Final but polite. And the strange part? Emma didn't notice. Or if she did, she didn't let on. She came home that Saturday afternoon, slipped her wet shoes off at the door like always, gave me the same quick smile, and asked if I wanted to watch something. "We haven't had a real movie night in forever," she said, and I think she meant it. I really do. But when I looked at her, all I could think about was the way her body leaned toward him at that cafe, how naturally her hand hovered near his, the way her laugh had opened up in a way it hadn't for me in months. So I said I had work to catch up on. She nodded and didn't press. From there, the days began to stretch out like threadbare fabric. Thin, see-through. We moved through the house like background actors, present but not participating. She stopped trying to ask where I was going. I stopped asking where she had been. There were no fights, no accusations, no tears. Just quiet. A heavy, polite quiet that filled the rooms more densely than furniture ever could. That's how it starts, the collapse. Not with screaming or slamming doors. With silence. With the absence of the little things that once held everything together. I remember the first time we went to bed without touching. It wasn't a big deal on the surface. She was tired, she said. She turned off her lamp first and rolled to the far edge of the mattress, pulling the covers tight. I stared at the ceiling, pretending not to care, but I counted the inches between us. 5, maybe 6, and it felt like a canyon. The next night, I didn't even try. I climbed into bed, turned off the light, and let the silence do what it does best, grow. Some nights, I'd stay up late just to avoid the routine. I'd sit on the couch and stare at nothing. Not the TV, not my phone, not even a book. Just sit. The clock would tick, the refrigerator would hum, and somewhere upstairs, I'd hear her brushing her teeth. The same pattern every night, like the house was going through the motions even when we weren't. She stopped laughing in the kitchen. That hit me harder than I expected. There was a time when she'd crack jokes while making coffee, play old R&B on her phone while waiting for the kettle to boil. Now she moved through the space like a guest. Efficient, silent, eyes on her phone. The mug she used every morning, the blue one with the chipped rim, stayed in the dishwasher for days. I didn't ask why. She switched to a travel tumbler instead. One night, I heard her giggling on the phone in the next room. Not loud, just enough to hear the joy in her voice. When she came out and sat next to me on the couch, her expression was calm. She didn't mention the call. I didn't ask. She picked up the remote and started scrolling through Netflix, as if nothing had happened. It was moments like that that made the house feel foreign. The walls hadn't changed. The furniture was still ours. Her scarf still hung over the back of the dining chair. My jacket still lived on the coat rack. But the house felt hollow, not physically, emotionally. Like someone had scooped the warmth out with a ladle and left only the shell behind. I catch myself staring at photos, the framed ones on the bookshelf, the Polaroids pinned to the corkboard in the hallway. Us in Banff, squinting into the sun. Her laughing in a Santa hat on the porch 2 winters ago. Our hands laced on a park bench. I started to wonder who those people were. where they went, when they stopped existing. She still texted me throughout the day, but only when she needed something. Can you pick up almond milk? Did we ever RSVP to Laura's wedding? I'll be late tonight. Meeting ran over. No more how's your day? No more little check-ins. No more miss you. The warmth had been stripped away, replaced by utility. And I responded in kind. We became roommates with matching rings. The physical space between us only widened. I noticed how we no longer brushed hands when reaching for the same drawer. How we no longer shared toothpaste. She bought her own brand and kept it in a separate container. She started sleeping in longer, waking up after I'd already showered and left the bedroom. Sometimes I'd come back in and find the bed half made, her side untouched. On Sunday mornings, she used to sit beside me on the porch with her coffee. Now she stayed in, earbuds in, eyes down. I once waved at her through the window. She didn't see me, or maybe she didn't want to. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal, it was the pretending. Watching her move through the house like everything was fine. The way she'd kiss me goodnight, perfectly placed on the cheek, with no feeling behind it. The way she'd set 2 plates for dinner even though we barely spoke. The way she'd text someone under the table while I sat across from her pretending not to notice. It wasn't a single act that broke us. It was the slow erosion of us, the 1,000 tiny choices to disengage, to keep secrets, to stop trying. The way she carved out space in a life we were supposed to be sharing. And maybe I was guilty too, for not fighting harder, for not confronting her when I should have, for accepting the distance as inevitable. But what do you do when someone chooses to live beside you instead of with you? You adapt. You shrink to fit the space they leave behind. I started taking longer drives, sitting in parking lots just to think, listening to the same song on repeat because it filled the silence better than her voice did. I found myself walking through grocery aisles like a ghost, forgetting what I came for, buying things I didn't need just to avoid going home too soon. And when I did go home, I'd listen for signs of her. Her laughter through the wall, her footsteps overhead, her voice behind a closed door. Signs that she was still here. Physically, anyway. Because in every other sense, she had already gone. She didn't fight with me, didn't yell, didn't confess, didn't ask for forgiveness. She simply faded. Like sunlight at the end of the day, gradual, quiet, inevitable. I once asked her, gently, if she was happy. She looked at me, blinked slowly, and said, "We've just been so busy. You know? Everything's a blur lately." That was her answer. That was all I got. So I nodded, told her I understood. And I think, in a way, I did. Because the truth was, I had stopped asking for more. I had stopped hoping for her to return. I had stopped believing we could fix what had cracked so completely. I stopped expecting anything at all. We were 2 people living inside a memory, one that had long expired. A house doesn't need to burn down to be destroyed. Sometimes it collapses under silence. I woke up before dawn on Monday, not by accident, not because of noise or nightmares. I woke up because I'd decided to. I lay there for a moment, listening to the rhythm of Emma's breathing beside me, steady and soft. The window was cracked open just enough to let in the early morning chill. Somewhere outside, a bird called once and stopped. The rest of the world hadn't woken up yet. But I had. I slipped out of bed carefully, without a sound. My movements were rehearsed. I'd gone over them in my head the night before like choreography. No creaks on the floorboards. No sudden light. I didn't want her to wake up. I didn't want a conversation. This wasn't a cry for attention. It was a process. I went downstairs, made coffee the same way I always did. Same scoop, same pour, same mug. The routine felt grounding. Normal. But that morning, it wasn't just for caffeine. It was part of something bigger. A ritual for the last morning I would be her husband in anything but name. While it brewed, I opened my laptop at the kitchen counter. The screen glowed cold and familiar. I typed in the browser, "State divorce petition." I had already researched most of it, knew the forms, knew the steps, but seeing the page open again made it real. I filled it out slowly. No shaking hands. No hesitation. Name. Date of marriage. Grounds. I didn't write infidelity. I didn't need to. Irreconcilable differences was enough. Covered everything and nothing. It was what people used when they didn't want to make it a war. And that's what this was, not a war, not a fight. Just the end of something that had already stopped living. I printed the papers. 7 crisp pages. I placed them carefully in a yellow folder, one of those basic office supply ones she always bought in bulk. I stared at it for a few seconds before closing the cover. Then I walked it over to the kitchen table and laid it down beside her favorite candle, the one that smelled like amber and something floral I could never quite name. She burned it often when she worked late. I knew she'd see the folder immediately when she came down for her smoothie. The symbolism wasn't accidental. I didn't want to be cruel, but I didn't want her to miss it either. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stood by the sink, sipping. Looking out the window, the sky was pale and overcast. Somewhere to my left, the neighbor's dog barked twice. The refrigerator hummed. Everything was the same. And yet it wasn't. I didn't feel anger. That had passed. I didn't feel sadness either. That had already burned out. What I felt was something colder, but not in a bitter way. It was a kind of stillness, a sense of completion, like the last line of a book you've been reading for years. When I heard her footsteps upstairs, I didn't move. I didn't call up to her. I just stood there, finishing my coffee. I listened as she walked to the bathroom, turned on the faucet, moved through her routine like clockwork. Then the steps down the stairs, soft and unhurried. The floor creaked once, same spot it always did, and then silence. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I heard the pause. She'd seen it. Seconds passed. Maybe more than a few. Then she said my name. Just once. Soft. Measured. "Hey, Mark." I turned around. She stood at the edge of the kitchen, the yellow folder open in her hands, her eyes scanning the top page. She didn't look confused. She didn't even look shocked. She just looked pale, like her skin had forgotten how to hold color. "What is this?" she asked. Her voice was thin, but not weak, like someone trying to sound composed while the ground shifted under them. "You know what it is," I said. She swallowed hard, blinked. "You're filing for divorce?" "I already did," I said. "I just need you to read it. Sign it when you're ready." Her eyes flicked back to the papers. "But we haven't even talked." I nodded. "I know." She set the folder down, not slamming it, just carefully, like it was fragile. She stared at me for a long time. Her mouth opened, then closed. "I don't understand," she said. "You do," I replied. And I watched it, the flicker of recognition behind her eyes. The shift. The memory of every unspoken thing between us over the last 6 months. The mornings she left without saying goodbye. The nights she laughed at texts she wouldn't let me see. The moment in that cafe when she let someone else touch her like I no longer could. Her face twisted slightly. Part shock, part blame, part something else I couldn't name. "So that's it?" she asked. "You're just walking away?" I didn't answer right away. I took a sip of my coffee, now lukewarm, and then met her gaze. "I'm not walking away," I said. "I've been standing here the whole time. You're the one who left." She flinched just barely. Tiny wince. She looked down at the folder again, then back at me. "I didn't mean to," she started, but I cut her off. "You did. Maybe not at first. Maybe not intentionally. But you did." Her lips parted, but there was no defense coming. No righteous speech. No tears. Just silence. Because she knew. She knew the exact moment when she stopped choosing me. And it wasn't the cafe. It wasn't the shared wine. It wasn't even Alex's hand on her knee. It was months before that, when she started building a separate life in her head and forgot to tell me she wasn't in ours anymore. She walked out of the kitchen then, slowly, quietly, like a shadow backing out of a room. I didn't follow. I poured another cup of coffee and stared at the folder still lying half open on the table. Later that morning, she texted me from the bedroom. Just one line. "Can we talk about this?" I didn't reply. There wasn't anything to talk about. Every conversation we could have had been swallowed up by silence months ago. This was just the echo. Over the next few days, she tried to act normal. Made dinner, cleaned the bathroom, folded towels, played music when she cooked like she used to, but it felt rehearsed, desperate, like someone trying to rewind a tape that already snapped. I didn't engage. I wasn't cruel. I didn't slam doors or raise my voice. I just stopped playing the part. When we passed each other in the hallway, we said, "Excuse me." When we sat in the same room, we talked about weather, groceries, emails. Nothing with weight. Nothing with teeth. At night, I'd lie awake listening to the quiet. She'd turn over in bed, reach for me sometimes. Not to hold, just to make sure I was still there. I never moved, and she never tried twice. Eventually, she moved to the guest room. No explanation, just a shift of clothes, her pillow, and the glass of water she always kept on her nightstand. It wasn't a fight. It was logistics. The night before I met with the lawyer again, she stood in the doorway of the living room while I read. "Mark," she said, "are you sure about this?" I looked up from the book, met her eyes. "I've never been more sure." And the worst part? She didn't argue. She just nodded, stepped back into the hallway, closed the door behind her. That's when I knew it was over. Not just legally, not just emotionally, but spiritually. There was no begging, no bargaining, no declarations of love. Just the soft click of a door, and the sound of someone finally accepting what they lost. A week later, I was at a company event, the kind they throw when someone gets promoted. Emma came too, uninvited but smiling like everything was fine. When a colleague toasted balance between career and marriage, she laughed and said, "Well, my husband's like disconnected Wi-Fi in bed. But hey, the bills get paid." Everyone laughed. I didn't. I stood up slowly, calm and deliberate, and said, "Thanks for the wine." Then I walked out. No rage, no scene, just silence. But in that moment, something heavy broke off of me. The line she meant as a joke was a gift, proof that I wasn't her husband anymore. Not really. Just a prop in her story. And walking away, that was the first real thing I'd done for myself in a long time. After that night, Emma tried harder. Tea left on the counter, conversations she used to avoid. But it was too late. Her effort felt scripted, too polished to be real. I had already decided. Not out of spite, but self-respect. When I packed my suitcase, she watched quietly from the stairs. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I just zipped the bag and opened the door. She didn't stop me. I think she finally understood. Goodbye doesn't always come in a scream or a slammed door. Sometimes it's the sound of footsteps fading down the hall. Sometimes it's the way a door closes and no one rushes to open it again.